physics, and there are all sorts of things that we thought we knew 10 years ago that aren't true anymore. And it's that sort of, it's the arrogance and certainty and dismissiveness, and sometimes it can come across as sort of almost bullying, patronizing smugness from these people, which to me seems profoundly antithetical to the whole purpose of doing science and doing any kind of study, actually. Trying to find out what you don't know is the whole reason that anybody interested in letters or numbers or processes or anything in the world around us is engaged in. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find out the most information we can, synthesize it through a variety of different, with a variety of different sort of methods of interrogation, look at it through a few different prisms and lenses to see if that throws up any more illuminating insights, and then try to come to some kind of happy temporary coalition between the various different data. This is not what famous public scientists, like public intellectuals, do, because their media career relies on them oversimplifying to the point of parody, and to a great degree, their professional success and their financial success relies on them having the right opinions. Because if they don't have the right opinions about things, they don't get books commissioned and they don't get TV series. And all of these things, these are some of the reasons why, I think these guys, they're rich, famous, successful celebrities. I think they can cope with a bit of teasing, and I think they can cope with a bit of questioning from someone like me, because they deserve to have, they deserve to be reminded, I think, that intellectual humility is the cornerstone of any sincere intellectual inquiry and any discussion of with any integrity or sincerity or any claim to seriousness. That intellectual humility has got to be the cornerstone. It's got to be the foundation on which everything else is built, and they don't have it.
Yeah, I hear you. You mentioned that you characterize them as celebrities. There's actually, you may not know this.
No, it takes a special sort of schmuck to, like, on Christmas Day, just decide that of all of the things that are going on in your life that day, one of your line and have a go at Christians on Christmas Day or whenever it's close to Christmas Day. And I just thought, something is going on here, and what's going on here is not the neutral, entertaining popularization of science.
Let's go after maybe your bête noire, your top nemesis, even more than Tyson and Nye.
I don't even know what that is.
Feminist, no? Let's talk about feminists.
Feminist, my God.
But before you do that, let me sort of mention to you, some of my own trials and tribulations with this general topic. So as you may or may not know, I apply evolutionary psychology in the behavioral sciences, and specifically in consumer behavior. And of course, as a evolutionary psychologist, one of the things that, of course, I take for granted, as any sane person would, is that there are evolved sex differences between the two sexes. As a matter of fact, Homo sapiens are defined as a sexually dimorphic species, meaning that there are built-in differences between the two sexes. Now, you may or may not know this, but within the social sciences, this has historically been a profoundly heretical statement, right? Everything short of your genitalia is a social construction, and therefore to propose that anything is due to some biological imperative is outlandish to them. And so that discussion in terms of coming against feminists is not something that only I've engaged in terms of on Twitter and in public forums, but also in my scientific work. I've had to come across oftentimes people who were very hostile to biology in general and to biology as applied to sex differences. So that's, in a sense, that's why I'm particularly, drawn to the discussion dealing with feminism. But in your case, what is it that served as the catalyst for you to go after them? Is it just that you don't like their BS and you're looking for truth, or what is compelling you to go after them?
Well, I always find it entertaining, and as a journalist, we're always sort of ferreting. Our job as journalists is to sort of ferret around the fibs and the PR and the marketing and get to what's actually going on. And it struck me that feminism was a good example of this in action. It always remarkable to me. I mean, it sort of piques my interest when I see people denying obvious facts, in service of a greater good. Whether it's the narrative over fact approach to campus rape culture, in Rolling Stone, and all of the fake rape cases that publications either didn't look into closely enough because they didn't want to, or did look into closely enough and published anyway. Now that seems to me subject to something really systemically wrong. It's gone wrong. And as a journalist, I didn't come to it with a discipline that is sort of butting up against feminist academics in my work life as you did, but I've come to it from the point of view of a journalist whose purpose is to speak truth to power. And it's very clear that the most powerful social movement, the most powerful political philosophy of our time is feminism. Now the problem is the particular brand of feminism is poisonous. The one that occupies the seats of power in academia and the media and even in politics is a force for ill in the world, in my view. Now feminism, to be clear, I would call myself a second-wave feminist. I would never identify as a feminist these days because I think the term is ruined, as all but 7% of British women and 18% of American women now agree, who don't identify as feminists because they see what we see, that these people are crazy. I would call myself a second-wave feminist. I believe in equality of access and opportunity for everyone. I think everyone should have a level playing field, equal education, equal access to the institutions that surround us, and should be rewarded equally for their efforts, their talents, and their enthusiasm. That's not what modern feminism believes. Right. And modern feminism has become, I think, well, in the words of Christina Hoff Sommers, who I think put it best and put it most delicately, a sort of female chauvinism. It now seems to be principally concerned with hating men. Right. It's the sort of awful sociopathic hashtags like kill all white men, and I'm drinking male tears. I mean, imagine substituting any other sexual ethnic group into here, and you begin to see just how ugly this stuff is. And it isn't really about reasserting, anything on behalf of womanhood. It's just, in my view, it's just about hating men. And in order to do that, I think, in order to paint women as some sort of superior sex, you have to deny basic biological reality. Right. You have to deny all sorts of things, actually, which are self-evidently obvious to any sensible person. And you also have to have a particularly sort of these days, it seems, certainly looking at any of the feminists in the media and in academia, you have to have you have to be a sociopath, because to look at the facts as they are out there in the world today, in the West, let's be specific, and to claim that women are an oppressed class of person in the UK or the US is plainly insane. I mean, it just bears no reality whatsoever. In fact, what much of the data suggests is that the opposite is true, and that men are suffering. And just very briefly, I'll try and wrap up. Sure. The final thing that I really strongly object to, well, not the final thing, another thing I hate about feminism is it is profoundly anti-intellectual, as I suggested earlier, but also it has a loathing for free speech. Right. It has a loathing for open, honest debate. It is like the scientists I dislike, or the popularizers of science I dislike, it is a smug, sociopathic creed of dead dogma.
So go ahead. Finish your point.
No, I'm done. I'll be going forever otherwise.
So two things I want to say. First, I don't know if you saw, I put up a YouTube clip a while ago where I was summarizing some findings on sex differences in educational attainment in the United States. And so what this data looks at is 4 levels of university degrees, what the US calls associate degrees, which is the equivalent of about half a bachelor's. So associate degree, bachelor's degree, master's, and doctorate. So four levels of degrees. And then across 5 racial groups. So you basically had 20 cells, 4 levels of education by 5 races, to look at within each of these cells which of the 2 sexes was being granted the greater number of degrees. Guess out of the 20 cells how many men were greater than women?
Any?
0, exactly.
No.
And so I facetiously said that yes, there is rampant sexism in American universities. Of course, people would click on that thinking that it'll be the usual narrative. It's the exact opposite.
It's like, actually, no.
It's now, the other thing I was going to mention is that I recently had 3 very, very unpleasant exchanges with the types of folks that you're describing, 2 of whom were I don't know what it is about Forbes journalists. They're drinking something in the water, but These were two Forbes women whom I had interacted with very briefly on Twitter, and it very, and I mean, truly politely. I mean, it wasn't at all, it didn't have any sting. It didn't have, and the mere fact that they were being questioned turned into cyberbullying, and then right, and
that's an amazing thing they do. Sorry, you finish first.
Yeah, hold on. So that, and then now, of course, what I did is a strategy that I saw that you do in your own way, which is in your case, you call on your sexual orientation to protect you from your from.
Nonsense. What an allegation! What an allegation!
In my case, I call upon. I'm from Lebanon, brown man. I'm Jewish. I am overweight, and so I tack on all of the.
There. You've got a good oppression package there.
I've got a good oppression package, and so they literally are afraid to engage me because they know. So then I start saying things like, "Look at this white privileged woman attacking the fat brown man." And boom, they disappear. So actually, they don't debate me on the content. We literally have an oppressions Olympic contest. I win, they go away. But the other point the other one I want to mention was this woman put up. You can go check out her site. She's a woman who's trying to set up this new law in the United States called rape by fraud. Are you familiar with this idea?
Oh my God! No, but I can see where this is going.
Okay, so and I actually put up a clip, and she came after me saying that I was defaming her. So criticizing a public idea was libelous. So basically, she argued that when men and women are interacting with one another, if a man in the service of trying to bed a woman is duplicitous to her, and then beds her,
misrepresents his net worth or something,
whatever, right? Then that is rape by fraud that should be punishable by up to 20 years in prison. So
these people are insane.
So
go on.
I'm sorry. I did a YouTube clip where I sort of, without trying to even mention her. I mean, I had to point to her website because I have to demonstrate the actual reference. But I said, how crazy is it? Because, 90% of online daters, both men and women, would be in prison for rape because women will lie about their age, about their looks, about their weight, about this. Guys will
lie. Any woman in a push-up bra.
Exactly. The guy lies about his height, his income, his ambition. So, everybody is a rapist. But, of course, she came after me and said, you're going to hear from my lawyer because you're defaming me. So it's lunacy.
So, the two things there that you mentioned that I'll pick up on. One is the supremacy of identity politics over any sort of substantive argument. The idea that your worth in debate, and worse than that, the quality of your ideas is determined by your skin color. I find that so fundamentally abhorrent. Like, that's genuinely offensive.
Right.
That is actually offensive. That offends my, my intellect. It offends my sense of fairness. It offends everything. Like, that's genuinely offensive. The fact that the quality of my ideas and my work, that would be judged, would be dismissed or unduly promoted, either of the two, according to my skin color, my sexuality, or my gender. Insane. The other thing is, I don't want to cast aspersions on this woman in particular, so we'll speak about this in general terms.
Sure,
but very often I've noticed with these sort of particularly batty social justice warriors, and I've reported on some of these in the past. People, the Shanley Caines of this world, who's a prominent Silicon Valley feminist, the Randy Harpers, who is responsible for appalling abuses and yet sets herself up as a sort of anti-harassment champion. There's this incredible cognitive dissonance they have going on. Very often you'll discover deep dysfunction in their private lives, and my supposition, my guess is that very often the business of engaging in social justice, of bullying other people, of engaging in oppression Olympics, is quite often a sort of of therapy for people who are suffering. It's a sort of learned response to trauma, because after a while you realize that so many of the ringleaders in this incredibly off the wall movement have such checkered, dark, ugly pasts of lies,
how do you get access to that information?
Well, very often you see, of course, because they're attention seekers and because they are desperate for affirmation and to play and for victimhood bucks. If they want currency of victimhood, most of the time they publish this stuff about themselves. I've only ever written this stuff according to the Randy Harper thing. Everything I've ever written about Randy Harper is stuff she published on the internet about herself, and then later tried to cover over when it didn't fit her latest sort of twist and turn in her sort of endless quest to be accepted by anyone. The problem with all of this is I don't feel any animosity toward people who are suffering and looking for a solution, but I do feel a responsibility as a journalist to sort of cut off some of these people's influence if I can when they are unduly affecting innocent people. Right. And in the case of some of the feminists I was involved in the Gamergate controversy, or whether it is other deeply hypocritical, damaged people whose life mission seems to be to make others suffer on the flimsiest of pretexts and with and with the most insane, absurd arguments that are making their way up into the highest corridors of power in the West. Right? That's how worrying this stuff is.
You're thinking about Obama with his rape campus.
Obama with the rape stuff, or Black Lives Matter. Getting Bernie Sanders off stage and calling a halt to his campaigns. There's a particular kind of damage in the millennial generation that I don't think we had as Gen X, I guess. Yeah. We didn't have this. We had Nirvana, Marilyn Manson, and self-harm, and we got it out of our systems. But the millennials didn't. They didn't get this out of their systems. Is what I think is the first fully middle-class generation who've never really suffered. They've never really known damage, and so every slight perceived insult becomes a sort of catastrophic trauma that they need to then revisit back on the world. In the emo kids of the 90s who would sit in their rooms and cry and take drugs and cut themselves and listen to Marilyn Manson would at least get it out of their systems and turn it inward, and it wouldn't affect other people. But the millennials are doing something different. They're taking that teen trauma, they're dragging it out into their 20s and 30s and visiting it upon the rest of the world. And it's because I'm kind of on the cusp of both of those generations. I sort of understand the impulses and have a lot of friends in both camps. And I have to say, the millennials are just the most broken generation in history. So the way they treat others is just awful.
And let me add to that. I want to add to that. And it's something I think there's a big echo, by the way. Is there something on your end? There's a massive echo happening.
I can see if I can find a pair of something.
I think now I'm going to try to speak. Let's keep going, but maybe if you don't move, because I think you're hitting something.
Hold that.
Okay. All right, guys. We have some dead time. You can get to watch me look at the camera. For those of you who think that I blink a lot, it's because I look at the camera and that hurts my eyes. Oh, here you are.
I am. I've come back with a solution.
I was trying to explain to people while you were gone, because some people write on my comments section that I blink a lot. And the reason that I blink a lot, it's because I have to stare at this damn green dot and it hurts my eyes and I end up blinking a lot.
Me too. I actually have lots of different eye conditions and lots of different eye problems.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and I find it very difficult to look at one spot.
Exactly,
so I fidget a lot and I look around a lot, and everyone thinks I'm on cocaine, but I'm not.
Now, can I?
It's an earlier stage in my life.
Can I hope that if you're using now the headphones, it shouldn't affect, and it's still recording properly, right? Let's hope so.
We're going to be fine.
We're going to be fine. All right. So here's my theory to add to some of the mechanisms that you were talking about in terms of social justice warriors. So there's this psychiatric disorder known as Muchausen syndrome. Right? And there's also Muchausen syndrome by proxy. So Muchausen syndrome is where I desire so much to gain sympathy and empathy and people to pay attention to me that I feign illness so that then the doctors and my family and my friends can say, oh, poor Linda, yes. Right? Yes. And then, of course, by proxy, it's where you take somebody who's in your care, your pet.
Yeah, like your child.
And you do it to them.
You lie. It's these women who lie that their kids have cancer, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And so I think maybe for some of these social justice warriors, look, there is there is an opportunity to gain a lot of attention and sympathy if you constantly cry victimhood, right?
Yes,
you get the white knights to come to protect you and so on. So I think there's definitely that element that's taking place also.
It's interesting. We seem to have not just started to permit this, but to actively encourage it by allowing victimhood to become a currency.
Right.
It is victimhood is now social power. Right. If you can lay some claim to victimhood, you will the burden of proof on your statements lowers, your social standing and your earning potential increases in the modern sort of online Patreon, fueled economy. You will get press, you will get attention, you will have legions of sycophantic, adoring, credulous idiots on the internet lapping up your every word, if you can only persuade yourself that you were some kind of victim. And it's interesting that you should seek to pathologize it as some kind of because, and I think you might be right when you look at the language these people use and which examples of victimhood they reach for. So you occasionally see girls sort of wrongly, falsely claiming to have been raped. Now, there's absolutely no way that anybody can know how common that is. It seems obvious from the number of prominent rape cases that turn out to be frauds, i.e. all of them, that it's certainly a problem on American campuses at the moment. But it's impossible to get, there's just no numbers on this. There's no way even to find out what the numbers might be. So let's put that aside and let's consider the way in which social justice warriors articulate their dissatisfaction with the world and the way that they interrogate dissent and disagreement. Well, first of all, they give themselves syndromes and problems. They say that they are gender fluid and they give themselves all sorts of muddied sexual identities.
Right.
They constantly talk about being depressed or having trauma or stress. They say that they've been crying and the shaking and crying language. All of this stuff can sound very, very much like sort of diagnostic criteria for one of these hysterical illnesses. And then if you look at the way that they respond to criticism, they like to mischaracterize ridicule and criticism, which are essential and important tools in our rhetorical arsenal.
You're attacking
as bullying, as abuse, harassment, threats, and victimhood. What is that? That's called paranoia and persecution complex.
Right.
So it's interesting. I kind of have semi-thought it, but never really brought it fully out like you just did. I sort of semi-identified the kind of slightly pathological nature of a lot of this behavior. But I think you're right, and I think it's worrying if we've encouraged. I think we know that people are malleable, and people people will get what they can get, And if you tell kids that they can get away with something, they'll push it 10% over that. If you hand people a victimhood script and you tell them that this is the route to riches, to power, to fame, to notoriety, to social affirmation, which is an important currency. They're going to take it. They're going to use it. They're going to follow the path. And what the media has done, I think, over the last 5 or 10 years, is tell people that they have only to claim that they're victims in order to receive
get on Oprah.
Exactly.
Right.
To get on Oprah. And in fact, it goes when you put it like that, it goes a lot further than 10 years. This has been building for a generation or two.
There's something that I could use from sort of my personal history to combat some of those impulses that these SJWs have. And that is my personal history, right? So for someone who, I don't know if you know my story, but we escaped Lebanon during the Civil War as Lebanese Jews under, imminent threat of death. My parents then 4 years later, in 1980, we left at the end of 75. In 1980, they had gone back to Lebanon. They were kidnapped and some really bad things happened. And so somebody who's gone through, what you see in the news every day is stuff that, I grew up with and I escaped from, right? So it becomes very difficult for the Wellesley ladies to cry victimhood when I come in and I say, oh, you want to talk about victimhood because you don't fit into your pants anymore? Yeah. Here's a story of victimhood.
Melody Wellesley, before you carry on.
The reason why I mentioned Wellesley, by the way, is because I actually was invited to go there into the hornet's nest to speak about how the thought police regulate the free exchange of ideas. And
That must have gone nicely.
Actually, it was pretty good because I think I'm not really one that sends out the cues that you could intimidate me into a fetal position. So they were quite.
Don't. You're quite an alpha, aren't you? You do have
Well,
that's a little alpha in you. I can see it.
a little. But I wanted to move on to something else.